The accident. The screech of metal against asphalt echoed through the busy downtown intersection as Jasper Wellington's black Mercedes spun out of control. One moment he was taking an important call about the merger that would make him the youngest tech billionaire in the country, and the next moment his world went dark as his car crashed into the concrete barrier. Rain poured down on the wreckage as paramedics worked frantically to extract him from the twisted metal. Blood trickled down his forehead, and his designer suit was torn and stained. This was not how Jasper Wellington, CEO of Wellington Innovations, had planned to spend his Tuesday evening. "We need to get him to St. Mary's Hospital immediately," the lead paramedic shouted over the noise of the storm. "He's got a serious head injury and possible internal bleeding." As the ambulance raced through the rain-soaked streets, Jasper drifted in and out of consciousness. Through the haze of pain and medication, he could hear the steady beep of medical equipment and feel the gentle rocking motion of the vehicle. He tried to focus on the paramedic's voice, but everything seemed distant and surreal. The emergency. St. Mary's Hospital emergency room was buzzing with its usual evening chaos. Nurses moved quickly between patients, doctors consulted charts, and the constant hum of medical equipment filled the air. It was here, in this world of healing and hope, that Nina Rodriguez had found her calling. At 29, Nina was one of the most respected nurses in the emergency department. Her long, dark hair was always pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her warm brown eyes had a way of comforting even the most frightened patients. She had been working at St. Mary's for 3 years, ever since she had moved back to the city, to start fresh. "Nina, we've got a trauma coming in," called Dr. Samuel Hayes, the chief of emergency medicine. "Car accident victim, male, mid-30s, possible head trauma and internal injuries." Nina quickly prepared the trauma bay, checking equipment and organizing supplies with the practiced efficiency that had made her invaluable to the emergency team. She had seen countless accident victims over the years, but something about this case felt different. Maybe it was the storm outside, or the way the evening had been unusually quiet before this call came in. The ambulance doors burst open, and the paramedics rushed in with their patient. Nina got her first glimpse of the man on the stretcher and felt her world tilt on its axis. Even with blood matting his dark hair and an oxygen mask covering half his face, she recognized him immediately. Jasper Wellington, the man who had swept her off her feet 2 years ago. The man who had made her believe in love again. The man who had disappeared from her life without explanation, leaving her pregnant and alone. The recognition, Nina's hands trembled as she helped transfer Jasper to the trauma bed. She tried to maintain her professional composure, but her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. How was this possible? Of all the hospitals in the city, of all the nurses who could have been working tonight, fate had brought him to her. "Nina, I need you to start an IV," Dr. Hayes called out, completely unaware of the personal drama unfolding in his emergency room. She moved automatically, her training taking over even as her emotions threatened to overwhelm her. Her fingers worked quickly to find a vein, insert the needle, and connect the IV line. She had done this procedure thousands of times, but never on someone who had once whispered that he loved her in the darkness of his penthouse bedroom. As she worked, memories flooded back unbidden. She remembered the night they met at a charity gala, how he had rescued her from an awkward conversation with pretentious donors. She remembered their first date, walking through Central Park while he told her about his dreams of revolutionizing technology. She remembered the way he looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world, and she remembered the morning she woke up in his apartment to find him gone, along with all traces that she had ever been part of his life. The awakening Jasper's eyes fluttered open as the pain medication began to wear off. The bright lights of the emergency room made him squint, and he tried to focus on the figure standing beside his bed. Through the haze of his concussion, he saw familiar dark eyes looking down at him with a mixture of professional concern and something else he couldn't quite identify. Nina? He whispered, his voice hoarse and uncertain. She froze, her clipboard clutched tightly in her hands. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The busy emergency room continued around them, but it felt like they were in a bubble, isolated from the rest of the world. "Hello, Jasper," she said quietly, her voice carefully controlled. "How are you feeling?" He tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness forced him back down. "I can't believe it's you. After all this time. I mean, what are the chances?" Nina's expression hardened slightly. "Let's focus on your medical condition right now. You've been in a serious accident." But Jasper wasn't ready to let the moment pass. Even through his pain and confusion, seeing Nina again awakened feelings he had tried to bury for 2 years. She looked exactly as he remembered, perhaps even more beautiful. There was a strength in her posture that hadn't been there before, a confidence that spoke of someone who had been through hardship and emerged stronger. "Nina, I know this isn't the time or place, but I need you to know that I never stopped thinking about you," he said, reaching out to touch her hand. She pulled away as if his touch burned her. "Don't," she said sharply. "Just don't." The flood. Of memories, 2 years earlier, Nina had been working as a pediatric nurse at a different hospital when she attended a fundraising gala for the children's cancer ward. She hadn't wanted to go, but her supervisor had insisted that all the nurses needed to show support for the hospital's biggest donors. She had felt out of place among the wealthy philanthropists in their designer gowns and expensive suits. Her simple black dress had been borrowed from her roommate, and she had spent most of the evening trying to avoid awkward small talk with people who treated charity work like a social competition. That's when Jasper had appeared beside her at the bar, offering to buy her a drink and rescue her from a particularly boring conversation with a real estate mogul who wouldn't stop talking about his yacht. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," he had said with a charming smile. "Is it that obvious?" she had laughed, feeling instantly at ease with this handsome stranger. He had introduced himself simply as Jasper, leaving out his last name and his billionaire status. To Nina, he was just a funny, intelligent man who seemed genuinely interested in her work with sick children. They had talked for hours, and when he asked for her number, she had given it without hesitation. Their courtship had been like something out of a fairy tale. Jasper had pursued her with the same intensity he brought to his business dealings, but with a tenderness that made her feel cherished. He sent flowers to the hospital, surprised her with romantic dinners, and listened with genuine interest when she talked about her patients. For 6 months, Nina had lived in a dream world where love conquered all. She had even started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had found her happily ever after. The abandonment. The dream had ended abruptly on a cold February morning. Nina had spent the night at Jasper's penthouse apartment, as she had been doing more and more frequently. She woke up expecting to find him beside her, but the bed was empty. At first, she assumed he had gone to make coffee or check his emails, as he often did early in the morning. But as the hours passed, it became clear that he wasn't coming back. His clothes were gone from the closet, his personal items had been removed from the bathroom, and there was no note, no explanation, nothing to indicate where he had gone or why he had left. Nina waited in the apartment until evening, calling his phone repeatedly and getting only voicemail. Finally, the building security guard had informed her that Mr. Wellington had left instructions that she was no longer welcome in the building. The next day, she had seen the announcement in the business section of the newspaper. Jasper Wellington, CEO of Wellington Innovations, was engaged to Rebecca Chen, a prominent corporate lawyer. The photo showed them at some high society event, looking perfect together in their expensive clothes and practiced smiles. Nina had stared at the photo for a long time, trying to reconcile the man she thought she knew with this stranger who had been living a double life. She realized that while she had been falling in love with Jasper, he had been planning a merger of convenience with someone from his own social circle. 3 weeks later, she discovered she was pregnant. The present crisis back in the emergency room, Nina struggled to maintain her professional composure as she checked Jasper's vital signs. Her hands moved efficiently, but her mind was reeling with the implications of his presence in her life again. "Your blood pressure is elevated, but that's normal after a trauma like this," she told him, avoiding his intense gaze. "Dr. Hayes will want to run some additional tests to make sure there's no internal bleeding." "Nina, please," Jasper said, his voice stronger now. "I know you probably hate me, and you have every right to. But seeing you again, it's like the universe is giving me a second chance." She finally looked directly at him, and he saw the pain in her eyes that she had been trying to hide. "A second chance?" she said quietly. "You think this is about second chances?" Before he could respond, Dr. Hayes approached the bed with a chart in his hands. "Mr. Wellington, the good news is that your CT scan looks clear. No signs of serious brain injury. However, we're going to keep you overnight for observation, just to be safe." Jasper nodded, but his attention remained focused on Nina. He could see that she was struggling with emotions she didn't want to show, and he desperately wanted to understand what had put that hurt in her eyes. As Dr. Hayes moved on to his next patient, Nina began to clean up the medical supplies around Jasper's bed. She moved with deliberate efficiency, clearly trying to finish her tasks and escape the awkward situation. "I have to go check on other patients," she said without looking at him. "Will I see you again before I'm discharged?" he asked. She paused, at the foot of his bed, her hand resting on the chart. "I work the night shift. I'll probably be here when you leave in the morning." "Nina," he called as she started to walk away. "For what it's worth, leaving you was the biggest mistake I ever made." She stopped, but didn't turn around. "Some mistakes can't be undone, Jasper. Some people don't get second chances." As she walked away, Jasper lay back against his pillows, his mind racing despite the pain medication. He had spent 2 years trying to forget Nina Rodriguez, trying to convince himself that their relationship had been a temporary distraction from his real life. But seeing her again had awakened feelings he thought he had successfully buried. He closed his eyes and tried to piece together what had happened in his life after he left her. The engagement to Rebecca had been a strategic decision, combining their family fortunes and creating a business empire that would dominate the tech industry. It had made perfect sense on paper, but it had felt hollow and meaningless compared to the genuine connection he had shared with Nina. Now, lying in a hospital bed with his carefully constructed life in ruins around him, Jasper realized that he had been running from the one thing that had ever made him truly happy. The question was whether it was too late to win back the woman he had been too foolish to fight for the first time around. As the night shift settled into its rhythm around him, Jasper stared at the ceiling and wondered if fate had brought him back to Nina for a reason, or if this was just another cruel twist in a life that had already taken too many wrong turns. The long night, Nina couldn't concentrate on her work. Every time she passed Jasper's room, her heart raced and her hands trembled. She had managed to avoid him for most of the night, switching assignments with other nurses and finding excuses to stay busy in different parts of the emergency department. But she knew she couldn't avoid him forever. At 3 in the morning, during her break, Nina found herself in the hospital's small chapel. It was quiet and peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of the emergency room. She slumped into one of the wooden pews and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of the evening's events. Seeing Jasper again had brought back all the pain she had worked so hard to overcome. For 2 years, she had built a new life for herself and her daughter, Emma. She had learned to be strong, independent, and self-reliant. She had convinced herself that she was better off without him. But one look into his familiar blue eyes had shattered all her carefully constructed defenses. Nina pulled out her phone and looked at her screensaver, a photo of 8-month-old Emma sleeping peacefully in her crib. The baby had Jasper's dark hair and his strong jawline, but Nina had never allowed herself to acknowledge the resemblance. It was too painful, too complicated. She had made the decision early in her pregnancy that she would raise Emma alone. Jasper had made his choice when he walked away, and she wasn't going to chase after a man who had chosen wealth and status over love. Emma deserved better than a father who might disappear again at any moment. The discovery. Back in his room, Jasper was wide awake despite the late hour. The pain medication had worn off, but it wasn't physical discomfort that was keeping him up. His mind was racing with thoughts of Nina and all the things he wanted to say to her. He had been checking his phone obsessively, scrolling through social media and news articles trying to find any trace of Nina's life over the past 2 years. He discovered that she had left her job at the Children's Hospital shortly after he had disappeared, and had eventually found work at St. Mary's. That's when he found it, a photo on the hospital's employee newsletter from 6 months ago. Nina was holding a baby during a charity event for the pediatric ward. The caption read, "Nurse Nina Rodriguez and her daughter Emma volunteer their time to bring joy to our youngest patients." Jasper stared at the photo, his heart pounding. The baby looked to be about 2 or 3 months old in the picture, which would make her around 8 months old now. He did the math in his head, counting back from the current date to when he had left Nina. The timeline was perfect. Too perfect to be a coincidence. His hands shook as he enlarged the photo on his phone screen. The baby had dark hair like Nina's, but there was something about her features that looked familiar. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her lips, the way she held her tiny fist up to her mouth. Jasper felt like he couldn't breathe. Could it be possible? Could Nina have been pregnant when he left? And if so, why hadn't she told him? The confrontation at 4 in the morning, Nina finally forced herself to check on Jasper. She told herself it was just part of her professional duties, but deep down she knew she needed to see him again. She needed to convince herself that the feelings stirring in her chest were just memories, not something real and present. She found him sitting up in bed, staring at his phone with an expression of shock and disbelief. When he looked up and saw her, his face was pale and his eyes were wide with a mixture of hope and fear. "Nina," he said quietly, "we need to talk." She approached his bed cautiously, her nursing instincts kicking in. "Are you feeling all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have," he said, turning his phone screen toward her. "Tell me about Emma." Nina's blood ran cold. The photo on his phone was unmistakable, the one from the hospital newsletter. She had forgotten that it had been published online, accessible to anyone who knew where to look. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "She's mine, isn't she?" Jasper's voice was barely above a whisper. "Emma is my daughter." Nina's carefully constructed walls came crashing down. She had imagined this moment countless times over the past 2 years, but she had never expected it to happen like this. She had pictured herself strong and defiant, telling him exactly what she thought of men who abandoned their responsibilities. Instead, she found herself fighting back tears. "You don't have the right to ask me that," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Nina, please, I need to know the truth." She looked at him for a long moment, seeing the genuine pain and confusion in his eyes. Despite everything he had put her through, despite the way he had shattered her heart, she could see that he was truly shaken by this revelation. "Yes," she whispered. "Emma is your daughter." The truth comes out. The words hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Jasper closed his eyes and took a shuddering breath, trying to process what he had just learned. He was a father. He had a daughter. And he had missed the first 8 months of her life. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice raw with emotion. Nina's composure finally cracked. "Tell you? How was I supposed to tell you? You disappeared, Jasper." One day you were telling me you loved me, and the next day you were gone. No explanation, no goodbye, nothing. I tried to call you, he said weakly. No, you didn't, Nina shot back. I called you dozens of times. I went to your office, your apartment building. I was told you were no longer available for personal correspondence, and then I saw the engagement announcement in the newspaper. Jasper winced at the mention of his engagement to Rebecca. It wasn't what you think. Really? Because it looked like you had moved on pretty quickly. While I was throwing up every morning and wondering how I was going to raise a baby alone, you were planning your perfect society wedding. The pain in her voice cut him deeper than any physical injury ever could. Nina, I never meant for things to happen that way. The engagement was a business arrangement, nothing more. A business arrangement? Nina's voice rose with anger. You're talking about marriage like it's a corporate merger. Do you have any idea what you put me through? The explanation. Jasper struggled to find the words to explain what he had never been able to fully understand himself. My father died when I was 12. He began quietly. He left the company to me, but I was too young to run it. My mother's brother took over as CEO, promising to keep it safe until I was old enough. Nina listened despite herself, drawn in by the vulnerability in his voice. When I turned 30, I discovered that my uncle had been systematically destroying the company. He had sold off the profitable divisions, taken out loans against the remaining assets, and basically looted everything my father had built. I had 6 months to either save the company or watch it collapse completely. What does that have to do with me? Nina asked, though some of her anger was beginning to fade. Rebecca's family owns one of the largest investment firms in the country. Her father offered to bail out Wellington Innovations in exchange for a marriage alliance between our families. It was the only way to save the company and the jobs of 3,000 employees. Nina stared at him in disbelief. So you chose money over love. I chose responsibility over happiness, Jasper said. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was being noble and selfless. You were being a coward, Nina said bluntly. You were afraid to fight for what you really wanted, so you took the easy way out. Her words hit him like a physical blow because he knew they were true. You're right, he admitted. I was terrified. I had never felt the way I felt about you, and it scared me. I thought if I walked away, I could go back to the life I had planned, the life that made sense on paper. The revelation. And did it work? Nina asked quietly. Did you get your perfect business marriage? Jasper shook his head. The engagement lasted 6 months. Rebecca realized that I was never going to love her the way she deserved to be loved. She called off the wedding and found someone who could give her his whole heart. What about the company? Gone, Jasper said simply. Her father withdrew his support when the engagement ended. Wellington Innovations declared bankruptcy 8 months ago. I've been trying to rebuild ever since, but it's been difficult. Nina felt a strange mixture of sympathy and vindication. So you lost everything anyway? Not everything, Jasper said, looking directly at her. I lost the things that mattered most. I lost you, and I lost the chance to be there for Emma's birth, her first smile, her first words. I lost 8 months of my daughter's life that I can never get back. The bank's raw emotion in his voice broke down the last of Nina's defenses. She had spent so long being angry at him, building up walls to protect herself and Emma, that she had forgotten how much she had once loved this man. She's beautiful, Nina said softly. She has your eyes, and she's incredibly smart. She started, crawling at 6 months, and she's already trying to pull herself up to standing. Jasper's eyes filled with tears. I want to meet her. I want to be part of her life, if you'll let me. It's not that simple, Nina said. I've built a life for us. I have routines, responsibilities. Emma has never known a father figure, and I don't want to confuse her or give her false hope. False hope about what? About you sticking around, Nina said bluntly. You walked away once, Jasper. What's to stop you from doing it again when things get difficult? The promise. Jasper understood that words alone wouldn't be enough to convince Nina to trust him again. He had to prove that he had changed, that he was worthy of being Emma's father, and maybe someday, Nina's partner again. I know I don't deserve your trust, he said. I know I have to earn it, but I'm not the same man who walked away 2 years ago. Losing you taught me what really matters in life. Pretty words, Nina said, but there was less hostility in her voice now. I'll prove it to you, Jasper said firmly. I'll prove that I'm not going anywhere. I'll prove that I can be the father Emma needs, and the man you deserve. Nina looked at him for a long moment, seeing something in his eyes that hadn't been there 2 years ago. There was a depth of pain and regret that spoke of genuine change, of lessons learned the hard way. I need time to think, she said finally. This is all too much, too fast. I understand, Jasper said. But Nina, I need you to know something. These past 2 years without you have been the worst of my life. I thought I was making a noble sacrifice, but all I did was throw away the best thing that ever happened to me. Nina felt tears threatening to spill over. I can't do this right now. I have other patients to check on. When will I see you again? Jasper asked. I don't know, Nina said honestly. I need to figure out what's best for Emma. She's my daughter too, Jasper said quietly. Biology doesn't make you a father, Nina replied. Being there does. Showing up does. Choosing your child over everything else does. The morning after, as dawn broke over the city, Nina sat in her car in the hospital parking lot, too emotionally exhausted to drive home. Her phone buzzed with a text from her babysitter, letting her know that Emma had slept through the night and was having breakfast. The thought of her daughter brought fresh tears to Nina's eyes. Emma was a happy, healthy baby who had never known want or abandonment. She had grown up surrounded by love from Nina and her extended family of fellow nurses and friends who had become like aunts and uncles to her. But Nina couldn't deny that there had been moments when she had wondered what it would be like if Emma had a father. When she watched other families at the park, when Emma reached for male nurses at the hospital, when she herself felt overwhelmed by the challenges of single parenthood. Now Jasper was back, claiming to want to be part of their lives. But could she trust him? Could she risk Emma's emotional well-being on a man who had already proven he was capable of walking away when things got complicated? Her phone buzzed again, this time with a text from an unknown number. This is Jasper. I got your number from the hospital directory. I know you need time to think, but I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay in town until you're ready to talk. I love you, Nina. I never stopped loving you, and I already love Emma, even though I haven't met her yet. Please give me a chance to prove that I've changed. Nina stared at the text for a long time, her heart pounding. Part of her wanted to delete it and pretend this whole night had been a dream. But another part of her, the part that had never stopped loving Jasper Wellington despite everything he had put her through, wondered if maybe the universe really was giving them a second chance. She started her car and drove toward home, where her daughter was waiting for her. Whatever happened next, Emma would always be her first priority. But maybe, just maybe, there was room in their lives for the man who had helped create the most precious thing in Nina's world. As she pulled into her driveway, Nina made a decision. She would give Jasper one chance to prove himself. One chance to show that he could be the father Emma deserved and the partner Nina had always dreamed of. But if he failed, if he hurt them again, she would make sure he never got another opportunity to break their hearts. The stakes had never been higher, and the future had never been more uncertain. But for the first time in 2 years, Nina allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, Love really could conquer all. The decision. 3 days had passed since the hospital confrontation, and Nina hadn't responded to any of Jasper's texts. She had called in sick to work, needing time to process everything that had happened and figure out what was best for Emma. Her small apartment felt like a sanctuary where she could think clearly without the chaos of the outside world. Emma sat in her high chair, happily smashing banana pieces with her tiny fists, while Nina watched her with a mixture of love and concern. Every expression, every gesture reminded her more of Jasper now that the truth was out in the open. The way Emma wrinkled her nose when she was concentrating, the determined set of her jaw when she wanted something, they were all echoes of her father. Nina's phone buzzed for the 20th time that day. Another text from Jasper. She had stopped reading them after the first few, but her curiosity finally got the better of her. I've been staying at the Marriott downtown, room 1247. I'm not leaving the city until you're ready to talk. I bought Emma a teddy bear yesterday. It's sitting here waiting for her, just like I am. Please, Nina, give me one chance to meet our daughter. Nina's heart clenched at the word our. For 8 months, Emma had been hers alone. The idea of sharing her precious daughter with anyone, especially Jasper, terrified her. But she couldn't deny that Emma deserved to know her father, if he was truly ready to be one. She looked at her daughter, who was now attempting to feed Banana, to her stuffed elephant, and made a decision that would change all their lives forever. The meeting. The coffee shop Nina chose was neutral territory, busy enough that she wouldn't feel trapped, but quiet enough for them to talk. She arrived 15 minutes early with Emma in her stroller, positioning herself at a corner table where she could see the entrance. When Jasper walked through the door, Nina's breath caught in her throat. He looked different from the polished businessman she remembered. His hair was slightly longer and less perfectly styled. He wore simple jeans and a sweater instead of an expensive suit, and there was something softer about his whole demeanor. But it was the way he looked at Emma that made Nina's heart skip a beat. The moment his eyes found their daughter, his entire face transformed. Wonder, love, and overwhelming emotion played across his features as he took in every detail of the beautiful baby girl he was seeing for the first time. She's perfect, he whispered, approaching their table slowly as if he was afraid sudden movement might make them disappear. Emma, who was usually shy around strangers, looked up at Jasper with curious eyes. She studied his face intently as if she somehow recognized something familiar in his features. "Can I sit down?" Jasper asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Nina nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She had prepared herself for anger, for confrontation, for emotional manipulation. She hadn't prepared herself for the raw, honest love she saw in Jasper's eyes as he looked at their daughter. The first connection. Jasper sat across from them, unable to take his eyes off Emma. She was even more beautiful than in the photos, with Nina's warm brown eyes and his dark hair that stuck up in unruly curls. She was wearing a yellow dress with tiny elephants on it, and she had what looked like banana in her hair. "How old is she exactly?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. 8 months and 2 weeks, Nina replied. She was born on October 15th. Jasper did the math in his head, realizing that Emma had been conceived during one of their last nights together, probably the weekend they had spent at his cabin in the mountains. The memory of that perfect weekend made his chest tight with regret for all the time he had lost. "Does she have any favorite toys? Food she likes?" he asked, desperate to know everything about his daughter. Nina found herself softening despite her reservations. "She loves anything that makes noise, rattles, toy phones, pots and pans from the kitchen, and she's obsessed with elephants for some reason. That's her favorite stuffed animal." As if she understood they were talking about her, Emma made a happy babbling sound and clapped her hands together. The sound made Jasper's heart nearly burst with love for this little person he had only just met. Would it be okay if I tried to hold her? He asked hesitantly. Nina's protective instincts flared, but she could see the genuine longing in his eyes. She's not used to strangers, she warned. I'm not a stranger, Jasper said quietly. I'm her father. Something about the certainty in his voice made Nina nod. She carefully lifted Emma from her stroller and, after a moment's hesitation, placed her in Jasper's waiting arms. The moment was electric. Emma looked up at Jasper with wide, curious eyes, and he looked down at her with a mixture of awe and fierce protectiveness that took Nina's breath away. Father and daughter studied each other in silence, as if they were memorizing each other's faces. Then Emma reached up with one tiny hand and grabbed Jasper's nose, making a delighted gurgling sound. Jasper laughed, tears streaming down his face, and Nina felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. The revelation of change over the next hour, Jasper told Nina about what his life had been like since he left her. He spoke about the sleepless nights filled with regret, the way he had thrown himself into work to avoid thinking about what he had lost, and the moment he realized that saving his company had cost him everything that truly mattered. After Rebecca called off the engagement, I spent 6 months in therapy, he admitted, gently bouncing Emma on his knee while she played with his watch. I needed to understand why I had made such a catastrophic decision, why I had convinced myself that duty was more important than love. Nina was surprised by his honesty. The Jasper she had known 2 years ago would never have admitted to needing help, let alone seeking therapy. What did you learn? She asked. That I was terrified of becoming my father, Jasper said. He died young, and I grew up hearing stories about how he had sacrificed everything for the company. I thought that's what being a man meant, choosing responsibility over personal happiness. But I realized that my father didn't sacrifice his family for the company. He found a way to have both. Emma had fallen asleep in Jasper's arms, her tiny fist curled around his finger. He looked down at her with such tenderness that Nina felt tears prick her eyes. I want to be the father she deserves, he said softly. I want to be there for her first steps, her first words, her first day of school. I want to teach her to ride a bike and scare away boys when she's older. I want to be the kind of father who shows up no matter what. And what about me? Nina asked quietly. Where do I fit into this picture? Jasper looked up at her, his eyes intense with emotion. I want to earn your love back, Nina. I want to prove to you that I'm not the coward who ran away 2 years ago. I want us to be a family if you'll give me the chance. The test Nina wanted to believe him, but trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. If we're going to try this, we need to do it slowly, she said. Emma comes first, always. If you hurt her, if you disappoint her, I will never forgive you. I understand, Jasper said immediately. What do you need from me? I need you to prove that you're committed to being her father, not just when it's convenient or fun. I need to see that you can handle the difficult parts, the crying, the sleepless nights, the tantrums. Being a parent isn't just about the good moments. Jasper nodded seriously. I want all of it, the good and the bad. I want to be a real father, not just a weekend visitor. Over the next few weeks, Jasper began to prove himself in small but meaningful ways. He showed up every evening, after Nina got home from work, bringing dinner and offering to help with Emma's bedtime routine. He learned how to change diapers, how to make bottles, and how to soothe Emma when she was fussy. Nina watched him carefully, looking for signs that he was getting tired of the mundane realities of parenthood. But instead, she saw a man who seemed to find joy in every small milestone. When Emma said "da-da" for the first time, Jasper cried. When she took her first tentative steps between the couch and coffee table, he called it the greatest achievement in human history. The breakthrough. The real test came when Emma got sick with a stomach bug that left her crying inconsolably for 3 straight days. Nina was exhausted from working double shifts at the hospital and caring for a sick baby at night. When Jasper arrived that evening to find both of them in tears, he didn't hesitate. "Go take a shower and get some sleep," he said firmly. "I've got this." "You don't understand," Nina protested. "She's been crying for hours. Nothing helps. I've tried everything." "Then we'll figure it out together," Jasper said, gently taking Emma from Nina's tired arms. "You're not alone anymore." Nina was too exhausted to argue. She stumbled to the bathroom for the first real shower she'd had in days, and when she emerged 20 minutes later, the apartment was quiet. She found Jasper in the living room, Emma sleeping peacefully against his chest while he hummed a soft lullaby. "How did you—" Nina began. "I sang her the song my mother used to sing to me when I was sick," Jasper explained quietly. "I figured it was worth a try." Nina felt something inside her chest crack open. This was the moment she had been waiting, for without realizing it, the moment when Jasper proved that he could be there for the hard parts, not just the fun parts. The confession. That night, after Emma was settled in her crib, Nina and Jasper sat together on the couch for the first time in over 2 years. The apartment was quiet, except for the soft sound of the baby monitor and the distant hum of traffic. "Outside, thank you," Nina said softly. "For tonight, for everything. I can see that you're really trying." "I'm not trying," Jasper said. "I'm succeeding. This is who I am now, Nina. This is who I want to be." Nina looked at him, seeing the truth in his eyes. "I've been so scared," she admitted. "Scared to trust you. Scared to let Emma get attached to you. Scared to let myself hope that we could be a family." "What are you scared of now?" Jasper asked gently. "That I'm falling in love with you all over again," Nina whispered. Jasper's heart stopped. "Is that such a terrible thing?" "It is if you're going to leave again." Jasper turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his. "Nina Rodriguez, I swear to you on our daughter's life that I will never leave you again. I will fight for this family every single day for the rest of my life. I love you and I love Emma, and I want to spend forever proving that to both of you." Nina searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt or uncertainty. But all she saw was love, determination, and a man who had learned from his mistakes and become someone worthy of her trust. "I love you too," she whispered. "I never stopped loving you even when I hated you." Jasper cupped her face in his hands and kissed her softly, pouring 2 years of regret and hope and love into that single moment. When they broke apart, both of them were crying. The new beginning, 6 months later, Nina stood in front of her bathroom mirror, staring at the pregnancy test in her trembling hands. 2 pink lines. Positive. Again. This time, though, instead of fear and uncertainty, she felt nothing but joy. Emma was toddling around the apartment, chattering in her baby language to her father, who was on the floor building block towers for her to knock down. They had moved in together 3 months ago, taking their time to build trust and create the family they had always been meant to be. "Jasper," Nina called, walking into the living room with the test hidden behind her back. He looked up from where Emma was climbing all over him, his hair mussed and his shirt covered in Cheerio crumbs. He had never looked more handsome to her. "We need to talk," she said, a smile tugging at her lips. Something in her tone made him pay attention. He gently moved Emma to her playmat and stood up, concern flickering across his face. "Is everything okay?" Instead of answering, Nina held out the pregnancy test. Jasper stared at it for a moment, his brain processing what he was seeing. Then his face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen. "Really?" he whispered. "Really?" Nina confirmed. Jasper swept her into his arms. spinning her around the living room while Emma clapped her hands in delight. When he set her down, he dropped to his knees and placed his hands gently on her still flat stomach. "Hello, baby," he whispered. "I'm your daddy, and I promise I'm going to be here for everything. Your first breath, your first cry, your first smile. I'm never going to miss a moment of your life." Nina ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full of love she thought it might burst. "We're really doing this," she said in wonder. "We're really doing this," Jasper agreed, standing up to kiss her again. "All of us. Together." Emma toddled over and wrapped her arms around both their legs, as if she somehow understood that their family was growing. Jasper picked her up and held her between them, and for the first time in her life, Nina felt like she had everything she had ever dreamed of. The promise. Kept 1 year later, Nina walked down the aisle of a small chapel surrounded by their closest friends and family. Emma, now 2 years old, scattered flower petals with enthusiastic abandon, while her baby brother slept peacefully in the arms of Nina's maid of honor. Jasper stood at the altar in a simple black suit, tears streaming down his face as he watched his bride approach. He had kept every promise he had made to her. He had been there for Emma's first steps, her first words, her terrible twos tantrums and midnight fevers. He had been there when their son was born, cutting the cord and being the first person to hold him after Nina. Most importantly, he had been there for Nina, supporting her dreams, celebrating her successes, and loving her through every challenge life threw their way. As Nina reached the altar and took his hands, Jasper whispered the words he had been waiting 2 years to say. "I'm never letting you go again." "You better not," Nina whispered back, her eyes sparkling with tears and laughter. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to love each other through whatever storms life might bring. They promised to put their family first, to communicate honestly, and to never give up on each other again. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Jasper kissed Nina with all the love and gratitude in his heart. Emma cheered and clapped from the front row, and their son woke up just long enough to add his voice to the celebration. As they walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, Nina marveled at how far they had come. The scared, abandoned young woman who had raised Emma alone seemed like a different person now. In her place was a woman who had learned to trust again, to love again, and to believe in second chances. Jasper had fought for their love and won. He had proven that people could change, that mistakes could be forgiven, and that love really could conquer all. They had their whole future ahead of them, messy, beautiful, and perfect in its imperfection. And as they stepped out into the sunshine, together, their children in their arms and their hearts full of hope, they knew that this was just the beginning of their greatest adventure yet. The billionaire had learned that the most valuable thing in life couldn't be bought or sold. It could only be earned through love, commitment, and the courage to fight for what mattered most. And he would spend the rest of his life proving that he was worthy of the greatest treasure he had ever found, his family.